Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another fun rendition of Clackamas County Coordinating Committee. As always, it's a fun-filled agenda. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance and then go into introductions. Trent, if you have a beautiful flag picture, that would be stupendous. There it is. All right, ready? Here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Perfect. There's no delay whatsoever. Everyone was in perfect sync. It was great. So I'm just going to buzz around my window here. So I'll read your first name. Let us know who you're with, and we'll go from there. So Mr. Garrett Pryor.
Hi, everyone. Happy Wilsonville resident here with ODOT, though, in my day job as their toll policy manager. Passing it back.
Perfect. Welcome. Mr. Gornick.
Paul Gornick from the Oak Lodge Water Services Board of Directors.
Great. Martin.
Hi, my name is Martin Myers. I'm a CPO rep with Redland, and here I'm as a C4 rep for all the CPOs.
Mr. Savas.
Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner. Welcome, everyone.
Mandy.
Good evening, Mandy Putney with ODOT. You'll hear from me later.
Brett.
Brett Sherman, City Councilor, Happy Valley. Good evening, representing Clackamas Cities.
Perfect. Mr. Dwight.
Good evening, everyone. Dwight Brashear. I am the Transit Director for SMART in Wilsonville.
Wonderful. Mayor Walters.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mayor Jules Walters of West Lynn.
Welcome. The floating head on my screen, Mr. Gronke.
Ed Gronke, I just floated in. I'm the citizen rep for Clackamas County on Impact.
Perfect. Mr. Buck.
Joe Buck, Mayor of Lake Oswego.
Thank you. Miss Pratt.
Valerie Pratt, Tallinn City Council.
Perfect. Teresa Christopherson.
Evening, everybody. Teresa Christopherson, Clackamas County and Mount Hood Express. I'm here representing small rural transits.
Thank you. And Mayor Fitzgerald.
Julie Fitzgerald, Mayor of Wilsonville. Hello, everyone.
Welcome. And Miss Heisey.
Hello, everyone. Kathy Heisey. I'm counselor for City of Milwaukee, and I also represent Clackamas other cities on impact for the moment, and we're working on it. And I am the Clackamas Cities representative to JPACT.
Perfect. Miss Vassar. Visser?
Vassar, close.
Vassar.
My name is Vanessa Vassar. I'm with the Oregon Department of Transportation in Region 1.
Welcome. Miss Lewis.
Hi, Christine Lewis, Clackamas County's Metro Counselor, actually District 2's Metro Counselor. And I have to apologize in advance. I'm splitting time with the Oregon City Parks Commission tonight, so I'll be in and out.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Miss Moo.
Hello, Bella. Just helping the ODOT team take some notes tonight and sharing the screen.
Okay, thank you. Miss Smallwood.
Yeah, Lori Smallwood, Sandy City Council. Good evening, everybody.
Welcome. Let's see, quickly scanning my, okay, we got, I think, Trent, did I get all the panelists other than yourself? And you are?
All the panelists are here. Quick hello to our attendees as well.
Thank you.
A few alternates in there, such as Tom Markgraf from TriMet. Thank you for being here, as well as Council President Hensley, our Can-Be alternate. Checking for any more. There's another name in there that I want to shine light on. That's Gail Greenman. She's the new executive director for the West Side Economic Alliance. It's going to be a good person to know, and so we'll try to work with the executive committee here on finding a way for us to meet her more formally at a future meeting. per her request, and I think good for this group too. So we'll look at that moving forward. Also, Marjorie Stewart, our alternate to CPOs.
Wonderful. Thank you. As I started to say, we are here as our usual monthly fare at a busy time of the year. And so I hope everyone did their homework, because I'm sure you have nothing else to do in your cities or your day jobs if you've got those, and are totally ready for tonight, right? Cool. Lots of thumbs up and blank stares. Perfect. All right. So we'll move into housekeeping. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of our last November 4th C4 meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Heisey. Appreciate it. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the November 4th, 2021 C4 meeting. Any questions, changes, comments? All right. All those in favor?
Oh, we had one from Councilor Pratt, or she was maybe voting yes.
I'm sorry, Councilor Pratt, did you have something?
That was an error.
Oh, okay. That's all right. So all those in favor then?
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Seeing none, that passes. Thank you very much. All right. So we are going to roll into our I-205 capital and tolling project updates. And it looks like Ms. Putney is going to be doing the presentation. So I will let her introduce her team and take it away.
Sorry, let me jump in. There's been a little bit of an adjustment. We've been talking with Vanessa and the executive committee about inviting Vanessa into this conversation, who is also with ODOT. So it's still part of the same gig. But as y'all know, the federal infrastructure package passed since your last meeting. ODOT is doing some good work on how they're going to spend their $1.2 billion that they're going to receive, which is going to be of critical importance for this group and all of our communities in working with ODOT on how that unpacks. A quick side note is that Vanessa is also a former C4 member who used to represent TriMet in this body. So it's a nice welcome back for Vanessa to come back to this table in a different capacity. So good to see you again, Vanessa. Thank you for the pivot. It is a little bit different since we posted the agenda, but same but different. I think this will also help with your conversation on the 205 topic, just our perspective as well as the executive committee. So Vanessa, I think we're able to give you about 10 minutes here, kind of being an ad hoc jump into the agenda. So take it away, and we'll help you where we can.
And I will share my screen. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
So thank you for making room for me on the agenda. I really appreciate it. I think you all are probably aware that a $1.2 trillion infrastructure package or act was signed into a bill in November. And so it includes a reauthorization of existing programs and adding funds to those programs. But it also adds new funding and new programs in one-time funds. So between 2022 and 2026, Oregon is going to receive about 1.2 billion in funding, and about 1 billion will go towards roads and 200 million in additional transit funding. So I'm just going to go through this, but I'm hoping just to hear from you before we pass it off to the 205 team. But again, this is just a breakdown of what funds are coming to Oregon. But here's a further breakdown in a pie chart that really shows what is in each program, or which program is bringing in funds to Oregon. And there'll be, as I mentioned, new programs and new funding. So there'll be about 250 million in investment in bridges, and about 50 million for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and 82 million for projects that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and a 94 million increase in improving the transportation system's resilience to earthquakes, natural disasters, and climate change adaptation. So this chart also shows the existing programs that will receive more funding, and that includes transit, safety, active transportation, and passenger rail. So transit's going to receive, as I mentioned, an additional 200 million. over the next 5 years. And then safety will receive about 45 million in additional funding. Active transportation will receive about 30 million more in funding. And then $1 billion in competitive grants will be available for passenger rail. And then lastly, there's going to be over 200 million for local priorities for cities, counties, and MPOs to invest in. And here is a general timeline of what to expect. So right now we're briefing the OTC and gathering feedback from stakeholders like yourselves on how to allocate the flexible funds that the OTC will be able to distribute. And then from January to February, staff will share the input received from stakeholders to help develop scenarios for allocating the funds. And then March, the OTC will make a decision on the scenarios, and there'll be an opportunity for public comment at that meeting as well. But there's several ways to stay informed throughout this process as we learn more information, and also for you all to provide more input in how the funds are allocated. But there'll be a presentation on December 6th to the ACT, and as well as the JPAC meeting on December 18th. There'll be an ODOT webinar that will be really informative on the 7th. And here's a link. I can send this information to Trent to share, but this is a link for you if you'd like to provide comments directly to the OTC. And then lastly, there's a webpage that the FHWA just launched that will be updated as information becomes available. So I kind of went through that a little fast, but I can send all this information to you again through Trent, and I'm happy to answer questions now or later about the funds that are coming through. Do you have any questions?
Counselor Heisey?
Thanks for that overview. I appreciate it, Vanessa. I'm a little cranky today, so this is not you, but $1.2 billion in one-time funding. We are looking at implementing a significant congestion pricing program in the metro region, and you're giving $30 million additional out of $1.2 billion to active transportation, and only $200 million is going to transit. That is a radical uninvestment in the places we need to invest in order to make alternatives to getting in your car successful. I know we need to fix our roads. I'm not saying and I know ODOT is in the hole. I understand where the push is coming from, but all of our efforts to address climate change are going to fail if we don't start investing in the places we need to invest. And we can't blame people for continuing to get in their cars if we don't do the investments that make it attractive and feasible to take different choices and make different choices.
Vanessa, maybe could you clarify which numbers are numbers that OTC will be deciding, and what numbers were decisions made as part of the federal legislation?
I don't know if you probably can't see my screen anymore.
I'm sorry, yeah, I turned it off so that we could
No,
have the
okay.
view.
So the OTC will allocate, where is it, about, well, there's some programs that are like prescribed from the federal government. And that's what you're seeing for transit and climate at this point, but there will be an opportunity for the OTC to allocate additional funds. And I can't find that number, but it's 32% of the total. I think it's about 400 million is what they're going to be able to allocate. So I think this is good feedback. So I'll document this and include it as a comment that I'm hearing that that's something that you'd like to see additional funding towards.
But as a clarification, the dollar amounts for the specific programs came through the legislation. So Councilor, it wasn't the ODOT or OTC decision to make those proportionate allocations. It's just a report of what we will have to spend.
I appreciate the clarification.
So my question, I think maybe Vanessa had already stated that we will get these slides.
Mhm.
Okay, and then I guess to kind of piggyback on the explanation of this money coming from the federal government is OTC discussing how to leverage this money with additional state dollars to beef up some of these other areas that we're talking about, whether it be, bike ped or bridges, which are in drastic decay, and other, road projects in that regards.
Yeah, they haven't gotten into scenarios yet, but that is definitely going to be a consideration. And I could, again, forward on that comment.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mayor Buck.
Thank you, Mayor. So for the different parts of the program, I see there's 9% for local. So are the other funds just for federal highways, or are they for roads, ways within ODOT jurisdiction?
My understanding, and Mandy, correct me if you know differently, but my understanding is that it's for ODOT facilities at this point. But there'll be, that doesn't mean it will be ODOT necessarily leading those efforts, or they could be within local agencies. But I think the portion that's set aside specific for local will go through, will be focused more on like local agency priorities, as opposed to the allocations that were directed from the federal government that we're receiving. Is that clear?
Well, sort of, I guess. And the flexible funds, can they be then spent on any transportation form, transit, active transportation?
Well, that's what the OTC is gathering input on now, is what could they potentially be allocating the funds for. And so they'd like to hear what the jurisdictions think in committees. So right now, that's what's happening, is going out to different committees and advisory groups to hear how those funds could be spent. And then that staff is going to go back to the OTC with that information and inform them of what we're hearing, and also draft some scenarios based on that feedback of how to allocate the funds. But at this point, they're looking at how to allocate it by program level, not at project level. So we're still like really broad and early in the process. And there's been nothing decided on how the funds would be allocated yet, in terms of the flexible funds.
And then just one final question. Is OTC having a conversation about how this this funding is going to relate to the I-205 tolling project?
I can take that one, Vanessa. Okay. That's a great segue. After all the other questions come in to the presentation that Garrett and I will do. Our direction so far is still to move forward with the understanding that toll revenue will be the way to find completion of the 205 improvements project. And we will look into the discretionary and competitive grants that will be available as part of this infrastructure package. We know that there won't be enough funds from any of those sources to cover the full cost of the 205 improvements project. So we are still planning on toll revenue as a source, and we'll look for additional options as we move forward.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I just want to clarify for everyone who's listening that I think we need to be cognizant of what agency or jurisdiction is responsible for just what. When I look at our transit deserts in Clackamas County, and where I think we ought to have more transit, that's within really the boundaries of the transit agencies, primarily TriMet for most of us, but not all of us. And that a lot of our local county roads and city roads, ODOT is not allowed to spend money on anything but the property they own and the facilities they own. So I think when we talk about the shortcomings or the lack of infrastructure investment, I think we need to be make that same strong statement at the Metro table and the TriMet the TriMet board and any other transit agency that's impacted by. And I think we need to find a way maybe to make that known. I have a very hard time explaining to people, always have for over 11 years, frankly, before even becoming a county commissioner, on how transportation decisions are made, where the dollars come from, because it's complicated and it makes it's not received as common sense from the average citizen. I think we need to recognize that, and how decisions are made and who makes them. It's sad. You have two boards that are appointed by the governor, the OTC and TriMet. I'll stop there.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Pratt?
Hi, Vanessa. I know you're early in the process, but I'm just wondering if the intent is to look at spending these money, what way you're looking at spending this money. Is it going to be equitable based on population, based on needs, or do you have an idea how that process will go at this point?
I don't. There is the ODOT strategic action plan priorities may guide the process, and they guided the recent STIP development process. So it could likely be a strong consideration for how these funds are allocated, and equity is a component of that. And so one scenario may be to allocate the funds similar to how the recent STIP was allocated. But the scenarios haven't been decided yet. So if you have suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. If you have like a specific suggestion on how what the scenario should be based on, if you think it should be population or in another way.
I don't see any hands, so I'm going to jump in real quick and just say thank you, Vanessa, for coming in. I do want to note that the comment period to the OTC is open now. Did I see that right? Is that correct, Vanessa?
Yes.
Which means, and it ends at the end of the month. Is that correct?
I think there'll be there'll be ongoing opportunity for public comment, but there'll be specific points that they'll weigh in. So I would suggest now, and then there'll be a meeting with OTC in a month or so to talk about the scenarios based on input.
Thank you. So C4 members, take that back to your jurisdictions. The IIJA funding is broad, covers a lot of spectrums. I think there's a lot of great comments here. If C4 wants to make a comment, I'm happy to support that conversation. I would recommend that we entertain that discussion after ODOT does their 205 presentation.
Thank you. I'll be available for questions as well. I'll send you my contact information.
Thank you, Vanessa. Appreciate it. Trent, did you have something?
Oh, just saying bye to Vanessa,
Oh,
but happy to, encourage more questions if we have them for her while she's here.
Well, if she's going to hang out for a little bit, I'm sure that there'll be more to come. So are we safe to move into the 205 project conversation? All right. Now, Mandy, I'm going to kick it to you and let you take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Some of you have heard me speak a lot lately, and I'm here with Garrett Pryor, Toll Policy Manager, and we're going to trade off on the slides because you're probably getting sick of me by now, and have some updates for you. We also want to have some more specifics about what we're planning in terms of our analysis over the next few months. And then at the end, Garrett has some questions. We'd like to get some feedback from you on how we're doing and ideas you have for how we can improve. I think maybe we'll ask for questions at the end, but feel free to put them in the chat as we're going, and we can try to address them as we do our slides, just so that we're able to stay on time and be respectful of your agenda today. And then I think we have Chris Wellender here, who's with the traffic team, in case there are some very specific traffic related questions. We might phone a friend and ask him to help us out. Next slide, please. The charge of the Urban Mobility Office and the toll program are to focus on these 5 key important issues facing us today, and to really use transportation and transportation planning in a different way than ODOT has done in the past. to center equity as we're moving forward with developing and implementing our projects, to keep climate change and our response to that challenge front and center, to understand how we can use our work to improve safety, to manage congestion in a region that's continuing to grow, and how we're able to do this in a way that has reliable funding base, which has not been the case so far. Next slide, please. The Urban Mobility Office is seeking a comprehensive approach to managing mobility and congestion in the broader Portland region. And with House Bill 3055, we really have the funding flexibility to move forward with the backbone of this strategy, which is a regional congestion pricing system. That's illustrated here with the navy lines on I-5 and I-205. This regional approach to congestion pricing will price all lanes on these interstates from the edge of the southern edge of the interstate bridge replacement project area to the Boone Bridge on I-5, and then all of 205 in Oregon. We'll also have core projects that are highlighted here in green. 217 Auxiliary Lane project is started and under construction. And we'll be moving forward with the other projects as we go. The 205 improvements project is the southern one here that overlaps with the I-205 toll project area. And the next slide, please, is my highlight news and best news of the night is that we went to bid this morning on the first contract of the 205 improvements project. We've been working really hard to meet this deadline and believe that getting out to bid in December will allow us to bring a contractor on board with sufficient time to be in the water next year in 2022 during the allowable in-water work window. So phase 1A includes the Abernathy Bridge, the adjacent interchanges, and a sound wall in Oregon City at exit 9. And this will be a 4-year construction project. Once it's done, we will have an earthquake-ready Abernathy Bridge. This will be the first of many contracts to complete the 7-mile project area. And we're really excited to get underway. Next slide, please. This project, as I mentioned, is connected to tolling as a way to help manage congestion. We'll be using variable rate tolling, and we're looking at tolling locations near the Abernathy Bridge and near the Tualatin River bridges. This will be modern electronic tolling. There will not be toll booths. It won't require stopping to put your change in a bucket. And so we we'll continue to move forward with education about this, knowing that tolling is a new experience for many Oregonians. Next slide, please.
Definitely. Now I'll pick up here then. So this is our Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee. And so Dwight Brashear is on it, who's here tonight. Abe Mullen, who's a part of Clackamas County Health and Transportation, are some of our more Clackamas County centered voices. We also have folks from regional workforce systems, safe routes to schools, and others that work and know the county well that are on the committee. And what their work is to really communicate directly to the Oregon Transportation Commission, which is a brand new setup as far as how we do kind of subcommittees reporting up. Usually there's kind of a check in that system on like an executive leadership of like ODOT or others before the OTC, but this is really a brand new way of doing equity as far as getting voices and centering that to the decision makers, which is the OTC for toll rate setting. And they're working on where are ODOT's commitments in diversion to neighborhood health and safety, to transit multimodal options, and to the low income impacts. So next slide. So they've been working the past really 6-7 months to get to these 7 statements that you see here. And there's a little more to these on the document that they brought to the OTC on November 18th, and the OTC supported each one of these statements. So going forward, whether it's commitments that ODOT will be making, will build from these statements that you see here on the screen, and I'll read through each one of those. That the toll program needs to be reliable, invest in reliable, emissions reducing, and competitive transportation options. That climate and equity are connected. That toll-free travel options for people, that there will be a toll-free travel option for people who are struggling to meet basic needs. That equity investments are there on day one, or we're going to try to do that even beforehand. This is a user-friendly system, that we look at language differences, technical access, maybe where people don't have broadband or other types of internet at home, and physical and mental abilities. That the benefits extend into Southwest Washington, and that this isn't just ODOT by itself, but that state, region, and local communities are working together. And I would just say in developing these statements, a couple of the key things that we really kind of struggled with and tussled with were the climate and equity pieces, because there's definitely a push from some members on the committee to get vehicle miles traveled, to have that a real, like reducing that be a main goal. But one of the easiest ways you could do that was just throw a big toll on the highway. But then that kind of inversely then affects your equity at the same time. So you can't go after equity or climate goals in a silo, that they really need to be done together. And then finally, the equity investments there on day one, that's where I think this new infrastructure bill is a real opportunity. If we look at areas around the country where tolling and transit is kind of brought on, or transportation options are brought on at day one, a lot of those other places used in like an infusion of federal dollars to help kind of jumpstart that until toll dollars came online. So would love to see your comments. And yeah, if we had more money for that, that would definitely make my job easier in trying to deliver these on day one of tolling. So that would be great. Next slide. For the low income impacts, this is a report I'll be helping to facilitate through the system. We'll be using that Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee, but we'll also be coming out to, we'd love to come back to C4 or other groups or forums, as you kind of have seen on this roadshow, and really developing how could that actually operate in a system, and what is the income level? How do we account for workers that are, I'm thinking about workers that are lower income, that live outside of this region, that kind of travel through at a one-time basis, healthcare and other kind of needs. And so there's a lot of questions to work through, but between now and September of next year, we're going to hone in some options and a plan for what that would look like, what that plan for addressing low income impacts would be. So we would love your help with that. Next slide. And here's a word I think you're going to end up loving, and I'm going to, Mandy, I think you're going to take this one.
Right, and this one, maybe it's a little early in the presentation, and so I'll go through this now and then reference it again later after I talk through a little bit more about what the analysis is that we're going to be doing. We've heard a lot of questions about mitigation. What exactly is mitigation? When do you figure it out? And who's responsible for it? And so I just want to be very clear that if mitigation is required for this project, it then becomes a project responsibility, and so it would become incorporated into the project in terms of development and implementation. Here we provided two different examples. These are general examples. I don't know if either of them will be applicable to the 205 tolling environmental analysis, but just to give you an idea of what could result in mitigation and what some considerations might be. So the first one would be looking at intersection operations and level of service. And if that level of service is significantly degraded, in this example from a level B to an E, we could consider a variety of different mitigations depending on the specifics of that intersection. They could range from improved signal timing, construction of turn lanes, modifying traffic controls, doing some sort of traffic calming measures, or looking at bicycle and pedestrian improvements in that area, if that was going to be a way to remove some of the vehicles from the intersection. On the other example would be looking at level of stress measurement for pedestrians and bicyclists. And if the level of stress were to increase from a low stress environment to a high stress environment due to increases in roadway traffic volumes that were related and caused by the toll project, we could look at a variety of potential mitigations, including enhanced crossing treatments, traffic calming measures to reduce vehicle speeds, or bike lanes. And again, once there's a commitment to do a mitigation, so that you're able to like remove that impact, that would become part of the project. So it would be ODOT's responsibility to do that mitigation. It wouldn't fall on the jurisdiction where that location was. Next slide.
And can I
please.
just build real quick
Uh-huh.
on that?
Sure.
I mean, so when I worked with the city of Tualatin, this is a really key thing in these federal documents, in these big planning processes that go through there. So just something like when you have concerns about diversion and what's going to get paid for and who's going to determine that, this is where it shows up in this mitigation that will publish with the draft environmental assessment. And between now and then, we're going to be working with you all to help figure out what comes behind that colon of potential mitigation, in those areas of impact. So just highlighting that as a point. Thank you,
Thanks,
Mandy.
Kurt. So, now moving into kind of exactly like, what do we know already about the project area and what is it that we'll be evaluating? We know that transportation options are limited in this corridor. And we have a transit and multimodal working group that we've been meeting with already. We are looking at existing transportation plans, looking at multimodal plans, asking about needs in the area. And this will be great information to have at hand once we are able to look at the detailed diversion information and how travel patterns will change in the future. We are working closely with transit partners and jurisdictions as we do this work, and really relying on the expertise of a variety of different transportation agencies. Next slide, please. This slide here shares kind of a variety of what we've heard so far in terms of regional needs, programs, and local strategies that have been discussed. So again, we aren't sure what might be applicable for us here, but we just want to illustrate that we've been having quite a robust conversation. Both, Garrett mentioned the Equity Mobility Advisory Committee, but as well as our working groups to really understand kind of what is on the mind of folks to think about what this area specifically might need and what some ideas we could be considering down the road. Next slide, please. We are doing extensive work at the local level to really understand top of mind issues like diversion, but then related issues like noise and air quality, kind of just basic quality of life considerations for the local system, as well as access to important cultural, religious, and community centers and locations. And doing this with specific interest in thinking about seniors and youth, folks living with different abilities. And again, our Equity Mobility Advisory Committee has provided great leadership and guidance here in terms of what we can actually measure. We have a robust set of performance measures to go along with all of these topics and more. Next slide, please. So back to the mitigation conversation. We can't figure out mitigation until we really understand diversion. So there are multiple types of diversion. Most people perceive certain types of diversion as more positive, and that would be when trips change in terms of changing their time of day, changing to a different mode, not making their trip by teleworking, for example, or changing a destination. Other diversion is often perceived as negative, like a rerouting diversion, which means that a trip would be made on a local system as opposed to on 205. So we are studying this. We've gone through, we start with a regional travel demand model, and then we keep going down to a more detailed level until we end up at the intersection level. I know that many of you have heard me say the intersection level analysis is coming. It's coming soon. It's coming soon. It really is. It's going to be here soon. It's going to be here next month. And so that's when we're really going to be able to have the conversation about locations where it looks like there'll be an impact. Once we're able to assess the impacts, then we're able to figure out what can we do about it. For the environmental assessment, we are trying to achieve a finding of no significant impact. And that would be the federal decision document that we're hoping to achieve. In order to achieve a finding of no significant impact, we have to successfully mitigate significant impacts. And again, once we make those commitments, that becomes part of the project. Next slide, please. This this area shows kind of our potential impact area that we're analyzing for transportation. And we've worked on this boundary with our local partners and jurisdictions and have worked to identify 50 specific intersections based on current challenges with diversion, as well as areas that we want to focus on moving forward in the future. So that's the analysis that's coming next month. We are planning extensive outreach and conversations, both at groups like this, as well as community level conversations to really share the information and gather ideas about what we might do to match mitigations with impacts. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it back to Garrett now for to finish the slides.
Sorry, my computer's trying to force restart for some reason. Snooze. Okay, I'll try to go quicker. So we've been doing a good amount of engagement and getting out in the community. Councilor Pratt, I see your questions there about when we can come to City Council. Let us know. We can show up. We have our Tualatin representatives on our monthly updates. And that's one of our 12 meetings of Oregon Toll Program work groups. We have a meeting of staff at almost all the folks that are represented here that we meet with monthly. 29 different organizations, committees, councils, briefed, equity discussion groups. So those are groups that are part of our community engagement liaisons that are in different languages that are kind of centered throughout the region. The emails, letters, web forms, that email newsletter update is the easiest way to kind of stay up to date on the project. And over 6,000 survey responses from those from our kind of online and social media and other kind of surveys that are out there. And then as you can see here from the map, just generally, the darker it gets, the more intense as far as the quantity of comments that we've received. And you can see there's a pretty decent amount from the Clackamas County area here and really kind of around that 205 toll area, which would be the first up in the system. So that's very understandable. And but also we're glad that we see that area is pretty darkly highlighted, that's where we're spending the most intensity and amount of our time hearing from. Next slide. So we've tried to, as much as possible, not have to create different spaces for people to come to talk about tolling. Our intention is really to come to you and to come to where people are gathered. In COVID times, that can be difficult, but really we're trying to work with Trent and others to use the Clackamas County infrastructure, whether it's this committee, the diversion subcommittee, staff meetings that are in addition to the general large group staff meetings. We're now coming to additional monthly Clackamas County level staff meetings where many of the cities are represented there as well. And we also have a bi-monthly meeting with transit providers, but Dwight and Christina Babcock at the county and others whenever we can get on their kind of monthly meetup or calendar as well, we're there as well. The community engagement liaisons are people that are embedded in Clackamas County in your communities, again, in those different language groups. We're financially compensating those folks. They're almost kind of like quasi ODOT employees because they're in the community and they're there for the long term to help this conversation, us work through it. Will be, as Mandy gets, we get that data from those intersections. And as we focus in on those areas where the negative rerouting is happening, that's going to lead to more conversations at a more like fine tooth piece of it. We know this many extra vehicles we're projecting coming through here. What kind of treatments, what kind of improvements would you want to see? And we'll continue that larger system of social media outreach, emails, and other kind of updates. So next slide. With all that, there are the websites for the two projects. We're also on Twitter at the @Urban Mobility Office. And last slide. Would love to answer any clarifying questions as well, but our main, we had kind of a slew of questions here, but some of the key ones I would say, if we could get some feedback on, are we are trying to do business differently as far as engagement and make this a more iterative process and not one where ODOT just receives comments, goes back into a black hole, and then you don't hear about us until we just come out with what's going to happen. So how can we, how are we doing so far? How can we improve that? Is the meeting infrastructure that I kind of walked through, is that helpful? We're trying to keep you from going to additional meetings or whatever. We're trying to come to you. So how could those work out? And yep, I can drop these in the chat. And then what would need to happen for this to be a benefit to your community? It's a hard question to ask, I know, but what is it? What are those benefits with tolling that we really should emphasize and then work towards? So I'll drop those in the chat and stop talking now, and I'll kick it back over to you, Mandy, or Mayor Hodson to take it away.
There are a couple of questions in the chat from earlier, Garrett. One was about the foundational statements, and from Commissioner Savas, why economic vitality and growth wasn't included in the foundational statements. I don't know if there's conversation about that at the EMAC.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, partly we're leaving it up to the committee to help kind of identify their priorities, and through that iterative process. I know that job access has been a key thing that they see in really making this tolling to make sure that is a key part of it. But beyond that verbiage, we didn't get any recommendations for the kind of framing that you said there.
The concern I'm hearing from a number of businesses is their ability to number one, be competitive, and about their patrons, their employees also, but about their patrons' ability or willingness really to incur a toll when there might be choices to spend their dollars otherwise, where they don't have to use a tolled road to get to a business. So I think some of them expect a shift in where their patrons go. And also whether or not their employees will be able or want to pay for, whether they can afford it or not, pay for tolls to go to work. That's an added cost. So as difficult it is to retain employees, this will be a disincentive. It's seen as, I'm hearing there's concerns about that.
That's definitely, yeah, it's a good concern of ours, I say as well. I know we have very specifically in the toll project work that Mandy's working on, as far as what we're studying, those type of workforce flow impacts are definitely something we're going to pick up and concerned about. I think through that low income toll report that we'll be working on, that might be another way to look at how can we lessen those impacts of workers that have to drive to these job centers a lot of times, really throughout the region, because of limited or non-existent transportation options.
Before I get to Mayor Walters, I just want to backtrack here in the chat and get these addressed. Counselor Heisey asked a question about the decision to toll all lanes. Could you speak to how that decision was made and why express lanes or other tolling approaches weren't applicable here?
Sure, happy to, Mayor Hudson, Councilor Heisey, thanks for the question. During the earlier work that preceded the toll program, we had a value pricing feasibility analysis process and a policy advisory committee. When we're looking at the at I-5 and I-205 and kind of the system perspective, and thinking about whether express lanes would work here or not, you really need to have more than one non-tolled lane when you have an express lane. Many places that have an express lane convert a HOV lane to a toll lane. We don't have an HOV system here in the region. And we have locations where if we were to price one lane, we would only have one lane next to it. And then the system breaks down at that point when you're looking at pricing. So when you're looking at a broader system approach, express lanes didn't seem like they would be a viable solution here for the region.
I know we also just look at geographic constraints of I-5 and what that would take to widen and it just the cost benefit of it. It was a part of that value pricing feasibility analysis.
Thank you for those answers. I know that Councilor Pratt had asked about how do we get in front of the city councils, which you guys did address. If you wouldn't mind dropping in an email on who do we reach out to, or because you guys will get bombarded here now, I think with you'll have a very busy January, I think, coming up for presentations. So I don't know if that's Mandy, your email, or Garrett, you're
Either
popping
one.
yours in there. So
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
that'd be
We can
great.
both put ours in there. You can reach out to either of us. We're happy to follow up.
Perfect. And then the questions are in the chat for everybody if you want to hang on to those and give that feedback here. Martin asked, how long after tolling commences will advanced financing of the project and mitigation take to pay off in full? And do you have information on the total cost of that financing?
I'm
You
just
go
going
ahead,
to read
Mandy.
it to follow along here. We don't know. I mean, until we know what the mitigation is, it'll be hard to know what the dollar value will be associated with it. We have, we expect that the 205 improvements project will cost, the full corridor improvement will cost about $700 million. And so the actual financing costs associated with tolling and with the project will really depend on the financing specifics. So we're a little ways off before we start thinking through that level of detail.
Okay. Thank you. Mayor Walters, Westland.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been scribbling notes and I'm going to try and read them. Hopefully it'll make sense. So diversion, as we know, is a huge challenge in Westland. And when we talk about that, we usually talk about Willamette Falls Drive, which is a huge challenge. But we rarely talk about Highway 43, which sometimes we'll talk about the congestion around the Arch Bridge. But I really want people to understand that Highway 43 backs up to the city limit and beyond. So it backs up into Mayor Buck's territory in Lake Oswego. So you've talked about mitigation and who is responsible. And when we talk about equity and climate justice, we need to have a conversation about Highway 43, which is an ODOT orphan highway. And there are many orphan highways in Clackamas County, as you know. So Highway 43 is lacking sidewalk connectivity and ADA compliance, which is a huge equity issue.
Yep.
Multimodal opportunities, which is a huge climate issue. Improved transit, including bus stops that are covered, because we all know it's Oregon, right? And it rains. So there are real opportunities for people to get out of their cars if those are mitigated. So I used to walk to the grocery store on the shoulder of Highway 43 with my son in a stroller when he was little enough to do that. Now we all know once they get to be like 2 or 3 years old, they become like Houdinis and they can climb out of anything. And then it's not really safe anymore. And I stopped doing that and started using my car just to travel 3 or 4 blocks up the road to go to the grocery store. And that's just not ideal, obviously. So that was 10 plus years ago. Highway 43 hasn't changed in any way since then. It's basically in the same condition that it's been in for decades. So what is the plan for these orphan highways that are most impacted when we talk about equity, safety, climate change, congestion, and reliable funding? I would love to have a clear commitment before the tolling moves forward about how we're going to address mitigation on these orphan highways countywide to make sure that we can make sure people are safe and getting to where they need to go in a safe way.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your comments and can relate to the child in the stroller scenario. I think there's 2 parts to my answer. One is like that for the toll program, we will be looking at 43 and diversion impacts, and then we will be able to pair mitigation with those diversion impacts if and where they show up. Separately, there is, quite a regional conversation about our urban arterials or orphan highways, and I think that conversation is larger and important, but will be broader than just the scope of the toll program. So it might be that there would be mitigations that would make improvements in areas, but I think the regional conversation about improvements that are needed at a corridor level, I think will happen on a kind of a parallel track.
Thank you.
And I just quickly, I'll build to say, like, Mandy and I were a part of the Urban Mobility Office, but Region 1 really helps manage a lot of those older arterials, like you're saying, and we're not doing our work in a vacuum. I know even looking at Gladstone, that's here, their intersection, I'm going to screw up the name now, it's Arlington and whatever, but we heard that was a concern with the tolling diversion, and we're working closely with the ODOT Region 1 folks about where is that in the funding process, where and kind of what kind of improvements that can be done there. So trying to take a comprehensive approach to it to see what all of ODOT can do, in addition to what Mandy said about opportunities through the regional process on where dollars could be spent there.
I appreciate that. And I think that some of that work ideally should happen before the tolling, because if we think about what it's going to look like after the tolling, and then adding a construction process on top of that is going to be a nightmare for many of our cities. So thank you very much.
Councilor Heisey.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to step back for a moment and just say, I see you, ODOT, trying to do something that you haven't done before. And I really do appreciate this endeavor to try and focus through equity and prioritize climate in the response. And it is hard to hear the words coming out of ODOT's, proverbial mouth sometimes, because we are accustomed to certain narratives coming from ODOT and used to it being a conversation about highways. So I just wanted to acknowledge that this is good work you're trying to do, and it's hard work, and it is hard for all of us because we've had our hopes dashed in the past. That said, I really appreciate question number 4 about what would need to happen for this to be a benefit to your community, and I think you already have heard this from us in various ways. We would need to see significant investments in making transit and alternatives to getting in your car, active transportation, micromobility, all, you know, the list. Really viable alternatives. And it speaks absolutely to Mayor Walters' comment and story just now. How do we make it easy for people to do something other than their very easiest option, which is also the option that is worst for the planet? Another thing that would make this a benefit for our community is to actually see emissions reductions. 40% of the state's greenhouse gases come from our transportation. That has real impacts that this county is acutely and painfully aware of, from ice storms to firestorms. If we can finally start to really lead on addressing the impacts of climate change, that will make a difference in my community. And it is important to my community. We talk about it a lot and people feel hopeless about turning this around. So this needs to be a way to create a narrative of hope. And getting back to that sort of that tension of what we're used to expecting from ODOT and what we're trying to do differently here. In the presentation, you said that the projects, any place that was identified as needing mitigation, that project would be owned by ODOT. It would be ODOT's responsibility. I think what we need to know in there is that there will be an ongoing commitment from ODOT to continue to maintain and update, because we all know that things change over time with transportation patterns, and hopefully they will change for the better, but they may not. And it is hard to hear that ODOT will continue to have that responsibility without understanding what the role is for local governments in that, and in that decision making about how do you do the mitigation. I understand that you're doing a ton of outreach and that's great, but moving forward, what I heard out of that presentation is ODOT is going to identify the problems from all of its modeling, and ODOT is going to figure it out, and ODOT is going to build it. I didn't hear, and here's where, once we've identified that, we are going to work with your local jurisdictions to ensure that this is the thing your community really needs. And we are going to ensure that it continues to be the thing that addresses the problem that we have created. And maybe I just wasn't listening right, but I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I don't think we said that very well, Councillor Heisey, and so thank you for prompting that. We are, the purpose of having our December and February conversations with the community will really be to do just that, to say, here's what we're seeing, what would this mean? What ideas do you have? And we do have a regional modeling group that has representatives from multiple jurisdictions on it that are working with us to review the traffic modeling and are with us every step of the way as we do the analysis. So we have jurisdictional input at that level too. In terms of the analysis and the review. And then we very much want it to be a community-based conversation in terms of the mitigation and the what do we do now kind of conversation.
And how does that carry forward? Because projects are discrete. They have a beginning and an end. So 5 to 7 years from now, if the mitigation measures that were implemented are no longer working, but it's still ODOT's responsibility, how does a local jurisdiction check in and say, this is not working? What is the ongoing mechanism for maintenance?
I think that's a great comment for us to take back to the team in terms of ongoing, monitoring and like future planning. So we don't have an answer to that question at this point, but appreciate the question and can commit to working on that one.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Heisey. Mayor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think Councillor Heisey covered a lot of points I was going to mention. So I'll just add that as I was hearing this, I also really appreciate that there's a lot on the table that is being looked at with all these different factors that have great hope climate, safety, equity, increased mobility. And that we also don't know, I understand, nobody can know how much money the tolling is going to generate. Because we don't know how many cars will keep driving on the tolling road. Will people stop driving? So the amount of dollars that this future program is going to generate is ultimately a finite number. And so the mitigation projects that ODOT can pay for are, related to that amount of money that can be generated by all of these projects. And I hope that we also, when we think about working with the local jurisdictions, we will look for also finding out what are the key priorities for the communities and also looking for efficiencies and good government fiscal accountability in these projects. Because this is the price tag of all of these things. We all know when we try to do one thing in our community, it's always way more than we ever imagined. And so I just want to, I think what I think our community would like, and probably others, is just a realistic thought about, there's not an unlimited number of fixes that we can do across all of this area. And how do we decide on the best ones? And how do the communities participate in that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Fitzgerald. Appreciate it. So I'm just kind of going through these questions in my head and listening to the different pieces that are being brought up here. And a friend of mine who's much, much smarter than me made a comment to me about how no matter how many electric cars we put on the road, there's still cars on the road. And no matter how many more buses we put on the roads, there's still buses on the roads. So there's going to be maintenance for those roads and bridges that will continue in perpetuity. Yes, there'll be less cars, perhaps. We still have roads that we need to maintain. Has there been, so there's that piece. I feel, so looking at like your questions that you put out there, which I appreciate, this is probably the most engagement, I think, in my almost 10 years on C4 that I've seen from ODOT. This is a very tenuous topic, to say the least. It's not, at least in and around the city of Canby, it is not a popular topic at all. So I appreciate the efforts to try to be as transparent in the process, and the things you're doing is a tremendous amount of outreach to get as much information as possible. And I hope that the amount of information that comes in does not impede the process. There is that, analysis paralysis kind of piece that could occur with as much data and information that's being collected and whatnot. I believe transportation accessibility, I think, yeah, that's going to be a big piece. People like their cars. It's convenient. It's easy to jump into. We just started a circular back in and around Canby, a daily circular, which is great. That adds convenience, and that generates, I think, more people opting to ride for it than ride our transit than not. I think I live in Canby but work in Hillsborough. There is no, I'm not foreseeing how you're going to create the opportunity for me to get out of my car and not drive to work the hour it takes for me to get there and the hour and a half it takes me to get home because of the congestion. Barriers to accessibility, and then the benefits to our community. We're concerned about the diversion. My first couple of diversion meetings, I was very frustrated to see that there were certain the modeling that was being put forth was not identifying roads and sections of Clackamas County between the tolling area and Canby that are already heavily used when there's an accident on 205. They were totally ignored in the modeling. So it tells me that their modeling is wrong. that it's going to be spread out much more across the eastern part of Clackamas County, or at least that area. I think topography becomes an issue when you look at sections of 99E, and Mayor Walters talking about Highway 43. I don't know if you've ever seen bike riders try to ride 99E between Oregon City and Canby. That is a life harrowing adventure, I think, for many bicyclists, and I give them mad props for having the guts to do that, because I would not. I think it was Mayor Walters that brought up 43, and I'll go back to her, and also my other really smart friend to make the point, is this an opportunity to where some of those quote unquote orphan highways, ODOT and those cities work together to make those jurisdictional? Does 99E through Canby become our section to maintain and take care of, and landscape and do the things that we maybe want to do? How do we create that partnership down the road? There's still a lot here for the ODOT team. You're not going to be able to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and you're not going to make everybody happy, but I appreciate that you're asking for the input. So I hope that this is beneficial to hear these things. The diversion, I think there's going to be, the tolling's going to go in. I think the diversion aspect of it all, there's going to be an initial push off the freeways. They will avoid it at all costs. Okay. And then I think that there will become a move back to the freeways after, like, I think it was, where'd she go? Mayor Fitzgerald talked about how much will be generated. We don't know, because we don't know how many cars are going to divert for a long period of time. Will they come back and then drive through? Will they not come back? Will it continue to be off road? There's a lot of those factors that play into what is that diversion piece going to look like from that road piece in Clackamas County, which we know is continually falling further behind on their road maintenance. So that road, all that's going to get chewed up, but then how are we going to reimburse the construction costs of 205 and those implementation aspects? So it's going to be a little bit of a water weenie situation. We're going to squeeze here, it's going to bulge over here, and then it'll shift. And how do we how does ODOT not chase their tail and start fixing or trying to find problems for solutions that are already there? So I think that's something down the road to be to think about. So I'll stop there.
Thank you for those comments. I will say, I think we have added Canby to our analysis area. So your feedback previously was heard, and that you will see more details coming.
Great. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah. Last night at our town hall on tolling, someone also brought up Arlington Road in Gladstone as a path that particular person takes to avoid the traffic when it's, at times. And I guess it's not, if I was that person, I would probably restate that and say that an example is Arlington Road. Because the point I'm trying to make here is that if it's not Arlington, it's another street, and it's another street. Everyone has the streets that they cut through in our neighborhoods where our kids walk, our kids play, they chase a ball, they chase their dog, and we have people that are getting off the freeway because of a situation, a problem that we don't need to create. And I've made this point for 4 years. We are creating a problem we don't need to create. There's no way we can make all these streets and anticipate all these cut-throughs. We can't make them safe enough. When the solution is simple, the solution is to have some free lanes for people to travel. That avoids the diversion. There will not be a reason for most people to divert aside from an accident or a backup or whatever it may be. I've been a big proponent for years for alternative fuels. So I'm really counting on industry technology to really solve really our transportation climate situation. You have automotive manufacturers that have dedicated and ceased production of internal combustion engines and had completely remodeled and redone their production lines in anticipation of going full electric. That commitment's already being made. So there's that closeout period. But I think we have to look at it like this. Is this region, or is every part of this region to be told, is the infrastructure ready? Is it right? Is it safe enough? Do you have the transit in place? And if you don't, you shouldn't be doing this. Now, I would argue there are places north of here in Portland that have a lot of alternatives, have a lot more safety features, sidewalks, grid structure. I think that those are far more prime for tolling all the lanes than it is here. This is probably the worst place, frankly, that I-205 corridor is the worst place to do that. You have no alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Commissioner Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I have a couple of disconnected thoughts that I just want to run through. The first is that I really appreciate that the tolling conversation for 205 is attached to the project and the capital improvements on 205. Because as Councilor Heisey points out in the comments, the phasing and the staging on that have to be integrated. But those are two silos that ODOT has managed to get to talk to each other. But the connection to the orphan highways is a third silo that needs to be implemented in terms of a communication plan. Mayor Hodson brought this up, but this isn't West Lynn's problem. It's still ODOT's problem when Highway 43 is a broken route. So I would hope that there would not only be the plan of how road could be brought up to standard, but a plan of how those finances can be identified along the same trajectory or time frame. I am also a big believer that congestion pricing needs to not be treating our communities as a bank, but it needs to be giving our communities options. And I don't know if we're going to have options by the time you're going to be putting congestion pricing on the Gantt chart. So I would challenge us to put a place or a line along the chart of when options can be off the ground, and hopefully those two places will align. And do we really need to be racing towards the year of implementation you've identified, or can we go hand in hand with I-5? That's been a consistent ask, is that we have a regional system, that we do this all together, all at once, take the step forward, 5 and 205. And I know we're racing towards a year in order to get bonding paid back for capital projects. Maybe ask us if we want to slow that capital project down by 6 months, a year, so that we can go hand in hand. I think I might actually surprise myself with my answer to that. And then lastly, we absolutely have to continue to have these conversations regionally. So Mandy, I thank you. I think you're on the MPAC agenda both in January and in February. I know you'll also be on JPAC agendas. I just see you on the agenda 2 months in a row. And I wonder if that's really enough time when you come back in February to have acted on what you hear in January. Are you coming in January to just check a box and then come back to us in February with something that looks like it was responsive, or are you actually giving yourself enough time to be responsive? You can come every month if you want. This is important enough to me, but I want to see ODOT really be able to iterate and stew on what they hear, so that when they come back, we're helping you get it right.
Appreciate those comments. And for the MPAC and the JPAC and the TPAC meetings, a lot of those are focused along programming funding decisions and the proposal to the amendment language. And so that's what we'll be sharing, as well as some overall updates for the toll program. We have adjusted some of that language based on input we received specific to the amendment. We are definitely listening intently as we're going. And I think you'll continue to see us make adjustments and refinements along the way. So I know that, you know, the proof is in the pudding. So hold me to that. But we're happy to keep coming back, and it just takes a little bit of time to do the iterations and the modeling and the review. So I understand that that's slower than some people would like. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. I also appreciate your comments about the timing and understand that perspective. I also will share that we've received some pretty clear legislative direction in terms of moving forward with timing of the tolling work, and as well as the 205 improvements project. And so there is some perspective that we're behind schedule already in terms of direction that was first received in 2017 to move forward with pricing in the region. So we're trying to meet a variety of goals and interests as we move forward.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Appreciate it. Councilor Pratt.
Yeah, as I'm looking at your last two questions here, I think a lot of people have spoken to on this I-205 section. I mean, we don't have a good transportation system, public transportation. We don't have a good bike and ped route, and you know, this traffic is going to be diverted onto roads that were probably built when there were wagon trains going on them, so they're not really meant for loads of traffic. And I don't see where even this tolling funding is going to solve all. It can't possibly solve all these problems. There's a lot of mileage in there. So what I would like to ask is, so those are our barriers to accessibility, but to benefit our community, I'm not seeing where that's coming about now. But what I'd ask of you is that you're doing a lot of outreach, listening to people, which is really appreciated, but that you take that and when you're done and you decide what you're going to do to make sure to outreach to our communities and the public so they can see what you're doing to try to deal with that.
I'll just say two things to that really quickly. One, from our equity committee, that's been one of the main of their points is, even if you do provide these new transportation options, how do people know about them? And that can sometimes be as large of a barrier as just investing in multimodal transportation. And so really to do that hand in hand piece of it. And then I would say that we had a slide on that transportation. It was a transit and multimodal strategy. And even in the idea that the needs, that needs slide that was captured there, for somebody who's worked in this area for a while, the way that TriMet plans, where it's kind of segmented in sections, they don't capture all that well the east-west connectivity that's needed. Same thing with our transit development plans. They're set up at the county level as well. So we really miss that kind of Beaverton to Clackamas kind of back and forth that's going there. So I see this as a real opportunity that, yes, we're not going to be able to do that entire list with toll dollars itself. You'd have to raise the price of that all the way up. But if we can capture those needs in a concise area in a package, then you all can take that to the other tables where there are those dollars for transit or the region or to the metro tables or to other areas of ODOT. That can be a helpful advocacy tool in kind of moving that forward, that this is an area of the region that has been lacking. We focused on it. Here were the ideas that came from that. Here's what tolling can do. Now, what can that broader network do to deliver those? So just my 2 cents.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate that answer. Councilor Sherman.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of random questions / comments tonight. You know, so one of my concerns, I guess, you know, as we look at like some potentially very expensive mitigation solutions and pretty broad solutions that potentially need to be will need to be deployed, you know, many on orphan highways, you know, if we're going to go through the process of bringing them to standard and potentially, you know, I guess maybe the question is, would they be brought to standard as part of this overarching package and kind of transferred to local jurisdictions as kind of part of this overall overarching process? One of my concerns kind of related to that is, you know, as you've talked about before, mitigation isn't really kind of the solution. It's just addressing the problem. And really the solution is alternative transportation options, creating much more significant options. And if they're not greatly increased or improved, really the project just turns into kind of a revenue generator and a non-highway congestion creator, and not much else. So I guess maybe the bigger kind of, for me, the longer term question is, as we look farther forward, what measures, or do we know what the measures of success will be? As we look at this, how will we quantify that this has been a successful project? Other than just saying, okay, traffic's a little bit better. Do we have any gauges at this point, or is that just way too far down the path?
We have a variety of performance measures to in terms of the analysis and the phase that we're at right now. So we will be able to measure our outcomes and our ability to achieve the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And then as we move forward, I think that would be kind of a conversation with the commission in terms of expectations for success, I guess. So I think there's still plenty of time for kind of the longer term view. I think there was a question earlier that kind of got to that too, in terms of what is the ongoing like monitoring and measuring approach once we have tolling in place.
Yeah, because there will be one. So what you'll see happen, so the NEPA work that Mandy's working through now on the project, that studies a whole number of things, like 40, 50 measures that are going on there. So what I see envisioning happening is we go through the environmental review process. That gets us through 2022. Then what happens is a toll rate setting process with the Oregon Transportation Commission. And through that, what you see happening in other places around the country where I've seen is that when you get into that toll rate setting process, there's a more limited number of those measures. They really try to hone in on like, what are the 5 or 6 things that we want to monitor from a revenue standpoint, but also from like, what are our actual goals that we want to do with those dollars? And those get adopted with the toll rate. So it's not a set it and forget it toll rate. And like somebody brought up before, like the mitigation you studied 3 years ago, is it even still viable once you get to the toll rate in place? That's a part of it, but that's not the only answer. Like you continue to have this monitoring system in place. So the OTC either can turn the knob to like toll rate up, toll rate down, is it meeting our goals? Or what are those new mitigations that need to be put in place because we're not meeting our metrics for how we want to measure success? So that's that like second pile of decision making that happens once we get through the environmental review process. And that's like a year to year and a half, that toll rate. So there's a good, similar to the outreach we're doing now, we'll do that type of outreach and supporting that up to the OTC.
Okay, so I think what I hear you saying is there will be factors, there will be things measured, but kind of at this juncture, we really can't say if we do A, B, and C, the result will be D. It's not that simple. Too many variables at this point.
We'll need to get to the draft environmental assessment. So we'll need to run that analysis to see that our first cut at like, we did these things, it got us these results. Then there's a public comment period. Then there's more turning of the dials, and then we get another shot at it, kind of in the final environmental, piece of it. So a couple of different looks at that coming up this next year.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm muted. I love it when I'm muted and forget. Mr. Myers, you're up.
Thank you. I was going to follow up on the comments just made. I just want to emphasize that the financing is going to play a material factor in those those measures of success, and not only in the measures of success, but also in full disclosure to the public. Because when we talk about a $700 million project that is going to be advance funded, we're not actually talking about a $700 million project. We have to factor in the cost of money, which easily takes us up to 750 or 8, and that just gets us to the construction and not the payback period afterwards. I'm glad that these will be part of the metrics. I think that's what is going to measure it, because there is so much slip between the cup and the lip in terms of how much money goes to mitigation and the other factors that these communities are very much focused on. And I'm afraid that that could get lost or buried in a discussion of what are the financial exigencies that have to occur in order for this to cash flow. So thank you. I'll look forward to that next set of analyses. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gronke.
As many of you know, I'm the acting chair of one of the CPOs in the county. What I've been picking up in the last week or so is more and more talk and more serious talk about a citizen-led measure that would stop the tolling on 205. I'm just curious, there was a statement made on the television news tonight, just before this meeting started, that it is impossible to have such a citizen-led initiative at this point. Is that true or is that false?
I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that question.
Garrett, any thoughts or anything you've heard or same?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know much about the, I mean, we can't stop initiative, you know, if people have initiatives and they follow the Oregon laws on it, then, you know, I'm not an expert in that. But.
Yeah, I would think, you know, Ed, if that's something that there's a citizen group looking to do that, they'll jump through the necessary hoops and get and see whether or not that will fly. I don't know either. That would be an interesting dynamic to add to this already very complex conversation.
Well, the word I get is this is a very serious attempt this time, and that there are well over 20,000 signatures already involved, and the petitioner hopes to raise at least 200,000 signatures.
Wow.
If I may, I just want to let people know there's actually two measures that have been filed with the state on tolling. And we have legislative council review on one of those. And I'm seeking legislative council, legal council review of the second one. The second one, the most recent one, I think might have, again, I'm not an attorney, but we're waiting to get that review, might have more strength than the previous one, or more impact. So we will see, and I'll hope to have that answered for y'all as soon as we get it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that. Mr. Bashir, and then we'll probably look to move on from this point here and wrap it up. So Dwight, go ahead.
All right, thank you and good evening. I just thought it was important to note that the small providers have been working directly with Garrett and his team, the tolling team. But we were working together even before tolling. And so I think we were able to elevate the I-205 project that Clackamas County, Washington County, Smart, Ride Connection, and a few others had been working on in having these conversations with Garrett and explaining that, you know, we needed to do something way ahead of tolling. We didn't want to wait for the tolling funding in order to execute on some of our plans. And I think, you know, we've had some good conversations with Garrett. We are certainly, if you look at the bus on my shoulder, there is what I believe is the prototype for what we can do on I-205. Now, you know, we would be foolish to think that is the only solution, but it is one of the tools in the toolbox that will, I think, bring as equity to tolling. So we're all in as far as wanting to be part of the solution. I don't begin to, you know, people are much smarter than me as far as whether tolling will be viable or not. That's not what I'm here to discuss. I'm a transit guy and I want to move people and want to move them efficiently. So, and I just think that shoulder project on the I-205 will attract a good number of riders. If we do it right and we advertise it, we market it, and we make it free to the rider, free Wi-Fi, and that's what we're doing on the I-5 right now, and it's working out really well for our customers. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwight. Appreciate that. Any closing comments from the ODOT team? Mandy, Garrett, anything that you want to throw out there that we maybe left off?
I think you covered a lot of ground, and I just want to say that we genuinely appreciate your time and your comments and your honesty, and we're here to listen to it all, and really do appreciate the participation of you and also your staff in terms of the time to work with us on our various working groups and activities. So thank you, and we'll keep coming back as long as you'll have us. And next month you'll finally start seeing some real numbers to talk about.
Great. Thank you, Mandy. Appreciate your time being here. Garrett, thank you also. Again, still a lot of heavy lifting to be done, and appreciate you guys putting in the work to try to get us to a level of understanding and coming to grips with the reality of tolling. So appreciate it. More to come. We're going to move into, I know we ran long, but I think that was a lot of important dialogue and a lot of conversation. So I appreciate you all very much. So the next piece on the agenda is the C4 agenda topic priorities. And there's a memo in your packet about that aspect of it. I'm really going to kind of lean heavily on Mr. Warren here to fill us in, or sorry, Mr. Wilson to fill us in on what we got going on with this. Trent.
Thank you. Before we jump into that, I just want to close the loop on something that we had talked about a little earlier, which was the opportunity to comment on the federal funding. That was something from that initial conversation. You had asked to sort of postpone maybe a decision on whether this group wanted to comment this month until after the I-205 conversation. As Vanessa said, there will be multiple opportunities to comment, but here is an initial one. And I mean, as many of you pointed out, the I-205 project, federal dollars being available. Trent's opinion here is that if you wanted to make a comment, it would probably be pertinent for this group to focus on the 205 project. IIJA is very big, very broad. This group has spent most of its policy focus on things that unite all of these groups, right? You're a coordination body, and the thing that brings much of y'all together happens to be the highway. So if you're going to provide a comment, I think you've provided a lot of context tonight to maybe go in a direction around I-205. If you feel like you want to take a future opportunity, I'm here to support that as well. Done some preliminary work just in case y'all did, but I want to hear direction from y'all.
Mayor Buck, you have a comment?
Yeah, well, so in addition to this feedback we can give to the OTC on this, the federal money, which I think would be important, then do we also have an opportunity to give feedback into this RTP amendment also around this tolling? Isn't that something that's starting to go on right now too? And you know, different body, obviously, but still, how do the two relate?
I'm going to bring in our good friend Jamie Stasny if she is available. Actually, I'm just going to let her raise her hand if she's available, so I'm not just bringing her over and she's eating, dinner. But it's separate but related. The comment period right now for the federal funding is open to comments to the OTC on how they will direct those dollars. What's different with that from the RTP conversation, as far as I'm aware, is that Metro, through JPAC and IMPAC, will have these opportunities to amend the regional transportation plan because she is available, because she's much closer to this than I am. We'll have those opportunities to sort of approve the panelists. There we go. We'll approve those amendments and allow ODOT to take some next steps that would move the project closer to fruition. I don't think it sort of affirms the project, but my understanding is that it It moves the project to do additional work that answers some of the questions that you haven't really had answers to yet. Jamie, now that you're here, you can correct all the things I just said. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So the RTP Regional Transportation Plan needs to be amended for ODOT to continue with the NEPA process for I-205. And so MPAC and JPAC will be considering that amendment, as well as an amendment to the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Plan to do the same thing in January. So there's a point in January, well, those are going to be voted on. It's one of the very few leverage points or vote points where JPAC will get to chime in on this process. And so there is a public comment period. It is open right now for the MTIP amendment. The language is available online of essentially what they're trying to change. And what it is language in that plan that says ODOT is programming funds to move forward with the NEPA process. And so by approving that amendment, JPAC and MPAC and the Metro Council would be giving the go-ahead to ODOT to finish that process. Does that make sense? I'm seeing a head shake. Thank you, Mayor Buck. So I think, so that is one piece of it. And it's, as we all know, it's all connected. So the other piece is the federal funding opportunity. And I think that's what Trent is saying. There's an opportunity here to Councilor Lewis's point earlier this evening to say if you need the money to finish the capital project or to keep it on schedule, but we need to slow down the conversation about tolling so it can be a coordinated regional approach. There's an opportunity there to ask the OTC to use some of those federal dollars on the capital project phase 1A, get that thing going and keep it going. And at the same time, slow down the tolling process so we can have that larger conversation. So you have the 205 NEPA process, which Mandy and Garrett filled us all in on tonight. There's also a NEPA process that will be starting on the regional congestion pricing or regional mobility pricing project. Basically, the rest of I-5 and I-5 tolling. That's not going to happen for another year and a half. So if things move forward on ODOT's current schedule, they'll get the 205 project approved. Tolling will start in 2024, but the rest of 205 and all of I-5 won't be tolled until likely 2026 or maybe even later. Maybe never. We don't really know because it's a separate process and a separate political conversation. So I think there's an opportunity here potentially for this group to chime in and say, okay, OTC, we'd like to see you use some of that federal money to keep our capital project going so we can do the seismic improvements to the Abernathy Bridge, keep that moving, and at the same time, slow down that tolling conversation, or at least give ourselves the time to develop a regional approach to tolling and congestion management that the region agrees upon, supports, it's intentional, coordinated, cohesive, and all of our concerns have been addressed before we kind of give the approval to move forward. That's my 2 cents.
That was very helpful, Jamie. So is this NEPA process related just to the tolling or to the capital improvements overall?
Great question, Mayor Buck. So the capital improvements project and all the amendments and everything for phase 1A were already approved. So that is already done. The full capital project improvement was done under a different NEPA for 205. Done, approved. Funds have been programmed for phase 1A, done, approved. This NEPA is only for the tolling project.
So basically you're saying if Councilor Lewis here can just get her colleagues on the council to not approve the RTP amendment, then we have the delay that we need on all this, on the tolling. Is that correct?
I think it's complicated, and I'm not sure if our ODOT friends are still here. I think they would say, you know, they need the approval on this to give us the answers to our questions. We all want to know about diversion. We all want to know about mitigation. And what they're saying is, we need you to approve this amendment so we can give you those answers. But it's really hard to trust. You know, we're going to give you approval. We have 2 decision points at JPAC to impact on this. This is one, and the only other one will come after rate setting, after everything else, when they want to construct those tolling gantries. So it's really hard, and I've articulated this to staff, so I don't feel bad saying it out loud to you all. it's really difficult for us to trust when we have so many unanswered questions that are so impactful to our communities, and we won't have those answers until after that decision point comes in January.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilor Lewis.
I just want to make sure this is a vulnerable moment because I think I'm asking a question I should already know the answer to. So the MTIP language for amendment, Jamie, you're saying is already set in stone and filed, or are they going to get the comment period done and then reflect new language for the MTIP amendment?
So what we've seen so far for the RTP and the MTIP amendment are draft language. I have heard there's a TPAC meeting tomorrow morning. We found out today they are looking to amend already the RTP amendment language. We submitted some staff level comments just to try and have them be more clear about what this would do if it was approved. And they're going to be incorporating some of those. We haven't seen them yet, but we'll hear about them tomorrow morning. So it's evolving, and I think it will continue to evolve, as well as the MTIP language. So it's not set in stone yet, but we don't know what it will say. I think the challenge is, what would the language look like to give us and to give all of you the certainty you need to be supportive of advancing this program ahead of and separate from the regional mobility pricing project and that policy discussion that will occur when the rest of the region is facing what we're facing right now.
Thank you. I just think it's wild that we had how many slides tonight and that language was not on any of those slides. Like, that makes me feel like we spent a lot of time in good faith. I would like to see the same from the other side, just saying, here's what's coming for you, at you, not for you.
I'll just add that they've been at C4 Metro to have some similar conversations and talked about some of this language. But yes, I mean, that's still an ongoing conversation. I think that's a fair point, Councilor Lewis. You know, I'm looking at the time, both of these conversations are really relevant, so I don't want to diminish any of it. And Jamie is a great member of our team here at the county, tracking this very closely. We have the benefit of Jamie at this meeting and at the C4 Metro subcommittee meeting. As your staff person here, I would say the RTP conversation can be continued at the C4 Metro table here in 2 weeks. Tonight's topic, I really need direction from y'all. Do you want to make a comment about those federal funds coming in? And then we can keep leveling up that RTP conversation at the upcoming C4 Metro meeting. Jamie and I can commit to supporting that. But for these federal dollars and what the OTC can or could do with them, would we like to make a comment about that? A C4.
Trent, I'm seeing a lot of head nodding in consensus to move forward with a drafting of some type of letter from this body. Commissioner Savas, you have a comment?
I just kind of wondered if a motion would be appropriate to help direct staff to craft something that reflects our comments and concerns and ideas here tonight.
Anybody like to make that motion?
So moved.
And looks like Councilor Sherman seconds it. All those in favor of staff creating a draft letter to get out to us and on these moves? I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Trent, looks like we've got direction to move forward with crafting a letter.
Okay, so a little process stuff here. FYI, Jamie and I and some others have taken a stab at drafting a letter in case you made this decision tonight. So I basically have one drafted. If you wanted me to read it right now, that's fine. But if you just want to go home, we can just work with the executive committee on some of those details. What I'll tell you right now is that keeping it very focused on I-205, the letter as drafted is very specific about using these dollars. Dear OTC, please use these dollars to change the conversation about the need to only toll 205 and find ways to use these dollars to move towards aligned timing on the regional toll projects. So it's really focused on using these dollars to move the timing of these tolls so that they happen at the same time. If you're going to toll anyway, do it at the same time. So it focuses in that sort of conversation. It's not very prescriptive because You know, it's an agency trying to do their job with a lot of money that has to go in a lot of different directions. But is there an opportunity to delay but keep the project moving, perhaps slowly, as Councilor Lewis said earlier? That's the tenor of the letter. If you want me to just read it, that's fine. If you have other comments on leveling up or leveling down, please let me know.
Commissioner Salvin, Commissioner Buck.
Yeah, I want to make sure Mayor Buck, he had his hand up before mine, I think. Okay. So I'm just wondering here from a strategic standpoint, if we say start them both at the same time, and let's just say, based on the discussion we had here tonight, that, you know, many of us find or believe after we look at all of the data that ODOT's can present to us, that maybe the I-205 corridor is not ready, and that maybe we want to take a stand that 205, tolling on 205 ought to be delayed until certain infrastructure and transit's provided. This might foreclose that opportunity if we send a letter saying, let's do it all at the same time. Would it not? Or when you said, is it all or for just the 205 corridor? I think that reference, if I understood it correctly, Trent, was that we phase it with all the other tolling, a mobility pricing, which covers both freeways. Is that correct?
Yes, the intention is to perhaps time it, align it with the regional mobility pricing project.
So that's where I have a little bit of heartburn maybe about, you know, doing it in a way that maybe gives us a way out if indeed it's not safely practical or feasible or ready to toll I-205 for those safety and diversion concerns. I don't want to foreclose that and lock us in.
Okay. Mayor Buck?
Well, you know, I just don't, you know, hearing Mandy's response to when I think Councilor Lewis, you know, asked this question tonight, to these, you know, different interests that they're having, to different needs they're having to satisfy, and they're already behind schedule with, you know, this implementation in some people's eyes, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, if it's not looking super feasible, maybe instead of just asking for one thing, you know, what about tossing into the letter the use of these federal dollars when it comes to mitigation? You know, what I'm concerned about is that they're going to conduct studies that are going to show that, you know, when the pricing's in place, that, you know, the traffic situation is going to be better all around. There's already diversion. There's not going to be any more diversion, so therefore we don't have to make any kind of improvements in any of, you know, the in any of these corridors or the other in our jurisdictions. So what if we focused on asking the OTC to direct some of these flexible funds to bringing these ODOT highways, these orphaned highways, you know, up to our city standards? That would help, regardless of what their findings are in regards to diversion, something that at least giving us a bite at this apple, and not to say we shouldn't ask, you know, for the timing to coincide, but that seems like it has a slim chance of them actually, you know, agreeing to, like, it would be a miracle, right, if they agreed to that.
Really appreciate that comment. And I think there's a lot of merit to it. Staff's perspective here is that if you open the door towards orphan highways, in general, it could slippery slope into, there are many orphan highways beyond just that with that which is in the I-205 area. And so,
well, we'd be specific.
Sure. But again, you know, the dollars, $1.2 billion is a lot. You saw how it's broken down. It's not really a lot when you spread it out over 5 years and break it down. So I think the dollars in this group would do well to keep it very focused on the 205 project in general. It's my recommendation. I'm here to serve you.
Plan A and Plan B.
And also, I mean, then that's up to those other coordinating committees to figure it out on their own right. If they want to throw down on their orphan highways and adopt them, then they can follow our move, right? All right. Thank you, Mayor Buck. Appreciate the comments. Councilor Heisey.
This is a really good discussion, and it's unfortunate that it's happening 15 minutes past when we were supposed to finish our meeting. But I understand the desire to have input. I understand Commissioner Savas's concern. I don't think that language would serve us well. I am more comfortable with staff's very narrow focus. I think when you go down the road you're suggesting, Commissioner Savas, it undercuts the power of the message. And I would be a lot more comfortable with just keeping it tight and focused. OTC is a big body that gets barraged with an avalanche of feedback. So the clearer and cleaner our ask, the more successful we will be.
And yeah, we have found it that we have found success in being precise and clear in what our asks are when we go in front of or try to get information in front of these particular boards and whatnot, especially OTC. Narrow and in scope and specific in verbiage tends to be very helpful, at least historically. So thank you for that. Trent, is that enough?
Mayor, I might just ask, I just put something in the chat. So I would just wonder if others, including Councilor Heisey, would think language that such as that would still be clear. And I think maybe even serve a dual purpose, frankly. I don't think it dilutes it if that intent or language is, does that. So Councilor Heisey, what are your thoughts?
My concern is that if we go down this road, it is very easy to perceive it as an attempt to just take tolling off the table altogether for I-205 on OTC's part, because when you are asking for alternatives, etc., and a minimum, we don't know enough about what that means right now to be very clear in that ask, I don't think. I mean, that's kind of the point that we had in our presentation from ODOT this whole evening, is we don't have the information that backs up that claim. So if we don't have a price tag to attach to that, if we don't really understand what we're asking for, I think it will actually undercut our position. I don't think it locks us in to anything. To leave this out. I think we still have a lot of flexibility. What we're doing is making a request of the OTC. We're not committing to, and if you do this, we're never going to complain at you again. They know better.
Yeah, and I might be a little bit biased, and only because having 3 family members killed in separate accidents on roads in situations like this, not tolling per se, but it's pretty personal to me, and all the stories and real life issues that have happened here in Clackamas County to residents or in front of homes. Those personal stories and impacts affect me deeply. So I might be a little bit biased. So I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to withdraw my vote of support for this.
Thank you, Commissioner. So here we are 15 minutes past, and we've got the agenda piece and some updates. And I know we're all so very used to long council meetings and whatnot, and water district meetings and things like that go till 10 o'clock. I really want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know I gave extra input to the tolling conversation. Trent, and if it's, well, I'll put it to the group. If it's okay if Trent and staff draft something for the executive board to take a look at, because we meet on Monday, correct, Trent?
No, it's 13th, I think. So it's Monday and a half.
Monday and a half. Okay. That gives staff enough time to draft something. We can look at it, kick it, and then send it out for everyone to take a look at. And then is there enough time, Trent, to then maybe have that as a piece for the January C4 meeting?
Oh, the comment period, the current comment period will close before that, and there are workshops next week. If you're going to give me the green light, I'm going to try to workshop the existing draft with the executive committee I'll send you something literally tonight, because like I said, I already have it drafted. I could read it right now if you prefer, but I'll send it to the executive committee. And if y'all give me the green light or feel like that's capturing the tenor of the discussion tonight, I'll just give it like a quick once over to the bigger group. Or if the group gives you the authority to say yes or no to it, we could go one of those two ways. Either this group gives authority to the executive committee to green light the comments, or I kind of show you a draft as approved by the executive committee early next week. So those are your two options based on what we've done in the past.
I would.
Trent, why don't you go ahead and read what you have?
Okay, give me a second. I'll share my screen so you can all follow along. I know it's late. We all like looking at little print here. Here we go. Directed to the OTC. It says draft all over it. On behalf of the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, we request the state of Oregon to use a portion of the funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act to diversify the revenue sources for the I-205 Capital Improvements Bottleneck Project between Stafford Road and Oregon 213, including the Abernathy Bridge. While we recognize IIJA is bigger than just one project, it is the priority of this policy group to advocate on behalf of the I-205 project and the communities that will be directly impacted by any diversion stemming from a toll program. ODOT's current proposal to toll I-205 ahead of the rest of the region is not necessary. Tolling the congestion pricing has regional implications and must be implemented in a cohesive and coordinated manner. In June 21, ODOT joined C4 and over 40 other stakeholders on a letter that explicitly stated new federal investments could, quote, diversify the funds to construct this capital project now and potentially prevent the need to toll the Abernathy Bridge years ahead of the implementation of a comprehensive regional pricing program. That letter is attached. Between the $1.2 billion coming to Oregon directly and the $100 billion in competitive grants made possible through IIJA, we believe there is enough flexibility to change the funding paradigm of this bottleneck project of regional and statewide significance. Combined with the funds made available by House Bill 3055 and the 21 state legislature, ODOT has the opportunity to correct a policy decision that unfairly tolls a roadway that has no meaningful alternative routes and that already experiences diversion into local communities. IIJA is a gift to Oregon, and if used well, can be a resource that brings our communities together. Please take this opportunity to prioritize these funds for the I-205 capital project in order to allow time for a cohesive regional approach to congestion pricing and tolling to be developed and implemented in a thoughtful, regionally supported manner.
Thank you, Trent.
Happy to leave it up so you can kind of keep looking at it.
Yeah, the way it's drafted after reading it here, I don't think it is as binding as I thought it might be. So I have less concern about it binding us to supporting tolling without alternatives in place.
We'll just appreciate your grace. We took a little bit of liberty to speak with some of y'all's voices as we drafted this, expecting that y'all might have some strong feelings on these comments.
So you're all psychic. It was great.
We work with y'all very closely, and we work with ODOT very closely, and we're tracking this very closely. But much of y'all's comments have weighed into this. So,
yeah, Trent doesn't hang out with this group too much, so you know. Is there any other thoughts or comments? Councilor Sherman, thought we hit the mark. Yes, Mayor Buck.
Can I just, so what's this on the letter you referenced that ODOT and C4 sent? So ODOT was, I don't understand, I guess, what, so they had signed on to a letter to the federal government pushing this legislation saying that it could, you know, reduce the need for this tolling paradigm.
yes, back in June, this group and all of these cool logos, including, look at the top one, very cool.
Yes.
ODOT,
Yes.
said, hey, dear legislature, you're talking about federal investments. It was June of this year. And then this very first paragraph is where I pulled that quote from. Federal contribution will diversify the funds to construct this critical project now. For the benefit of this group, I just want you to know that we worked very closely with ODOT to craft that very specific sentence. It was the only reason they agreed to sign on to this letter was the way that that phrase was crafted. So I feel comfortable letting them know that they signed on to this letter if this group would like to do that. And of course, C4 is on here in many of your cities. So that's the letter that I'm referencing and that we would attach to this comment.
I think the letter that you wrote is great. I'm just surprised when they're here tonight, why, you know, we brought up, you know, they're talking about the legislation. Why aren't they, you know, kind of the elephant in the room here? You know, they seem to just still be moving full board ahead with the plan as if the legislation hadn't passed.
I mean, respectfully to ODOT, they have many priorities, including the Rose Quarter and the, you know, Interstate Bridge, and they're stretched. I mean, I don't want to say that they're trying to avoid us, and they've been given the direction they need to pursue tolling. It's Trent's opinion. So I think they're stretched and they're doing their best, and they have limited dollars, and I think they're just trying to make it work. But it's your job to be the squeaky wheel.
Yeah, it's a good letter.
Okay, any other thoughts?
Well, I guess I would move to approve the letter and to have it finalized and executed.
Mayor Fitzgerald?
Sorry, I second that.
Okay, so a motion's been made by Mr. Myers and then seconded by Mayor Fitzgerald to execute this letter and fine tune as necessary. And then is it up? We're good as is in content with this group for the exec committee to just reread and approve at that level? What is everybody's wish on that?
My understanding of the motion is this letter.
This letter as is, okay. I did notice a couple of typo pieces there that I know Trent you'll catch and clean up. So we'll say as edited as necessary for sending on to the OTC. Does that work, Martin and Julie? Okay, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Get that letter tweaked and on its way. All right.
Thank you very much.
How the sausage gets made, everyone. It's fun. And sorry, for those of you that are vegetarian, I'm sure there's a really interesting way that vegetarian sausages get made as well. I don't know. I don't eat them, but I suspect it's interesting as well. Okay. Hey, I'm punchy. It's 9 o'clock. I've done this 2 nights in a row now. So, all right. Can we make short order of this agenda topic discussion?
I'm going to recommend that we punt that to the executive committee and that we meet and convene on that topic in January. It'll be my recommendation that this group sort of focuses on transit to revisit some of the comments and priorities that you made from the October meeting. This was going to be my recommendation anyway, but I'll work with the executive committee to tidy that up so that you can go home tonight.
Nods of approval. Okay, seeing nods that we'll take this to the e-board and we'll tweak it from there. Updates, JPAC, MPAC, anything? JPAC first. Councilor Heisey.
It was super quick. We had a stunningly similar conversation about I-5 bridge and ultimately did approve MTIP amendment there. We heard from TSMO on all of the nerdy things that they're doing through fascinating technology that nobody in that room other than them understood, improve transit and other timing around the region, and we approved their request for funding. There was some funding that came in from CRISA, which is the COVID money that is specific for transportation funding. And the thing that's of note there is that a chunk of change went to the Better Bus Project, 6.16 million. And that includes small investments to improve time and reliability of buses. There was also an addition of Sunrise Corridor project planning to the use of some of those CRISA funds at the request of folks in Clackamas. So that was good news for those who are cheering that project on.
Great. Thank you very much. MPAC update.
We just coming up here on the end of the year, we do have a meeting here next. MPAC is meeting next week. We are talking about the RTP amendment, the public comment period for that proposed amendment for I-205. Also getting a update on a report on emerging transportation trends. And then coming into January again, we have presentation again on the RTP amendment. So hopefully we'll have that further discussion at the Metro Subcommittee. Also mobility policy update as they present their case study findings, and draft of the 2023 RTP plan update. So Metro's updating the RTP now as well. And then a fee setting comment period discussion. So yeah, that's what's so good things in the year ahead for MPAC.
Great. Thank you very much. Climate Action Plan Task Force update.
That would be me. We had a meeting, a 4-hour Zoom meeting on the 18th. And we still didn't get done everything we needed to get done. So today we received a survey to define the strategy criteria for low carbon actions that are concrete and specific and can be implemented in the next 6 years. And the 4 areas that they divided everything into was buildings, energy, transportation, water, waste, and wastewater to focus on.
4 hours. Wow. That is a lot. That sounds like a city council meeting for sure. If we ever go 4 hours, gang, please take me out back and that's not a good, that's a long one. All right. I don't know what to say. Thank you for the update on there, Councilor Pratt. I appreciate it. Any other business for this group to talk about tonight that can't wait until the new year?
I'm sorry, I have one more update at your request. At your request, at the last meeting, the housing meeting, you asked for monthly updates on the revenue generated by the Metro Housing Supportive Services measure. So I will just give you this quick, cool graphic. I think that's what you're looking at, a green and a blue page, yes or no?
Yes, we see it.
This shows you what we've made to date, including what's happened in the month of October. So this gets to a little bit over $800,000 of revenue has arrived as of, I got this yesterday. So this is the most current information that I have on what's come in so far. It's just a little bit over $800,000 on the Metro revenue. So there you go. That's the update.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Anyone want to second that? Thank you, Councilor Sherman. Motion's been made for us to adjourn. We are going to adjourn. Everyone, have a great Christmas. Happy New Year. We'll see everybody in January. All right. Thank you all for the work this year. It's been great.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy holidays.